Picture this. It's 1962, middle of the Cold War. Somewhere deep in the Pacific, a United States nuclear submarine goes dark. Engines off, lights off. 600 tons of American steel sitting motionless on the ocean floor. Inside, a young sonar tech named Raymond Holmes is staring at his screen. And what he sees doesn't make sense. Hundreds of fish, then thousands, swarming the hull like moths to a flame. No bait, no sound, no light, just silent, cold metal, and a wall of living creatures pressing against it like the submarine was the greatest meal in the ocean. Holmes filed a report. The Navy read it, and within 48 hours they stamped it classified and locked it in a vault for 23 years. They didn't bury that report because it was wrong. They buried it because it was right. And because the answer to why threatens an $8 billion industry that's been selling you the wrong solution your entire life. Welcome back to Forbidden Lures. Today, we are cracking open that vault. I'm going to show you the exact science the Navy tried to erase. The same electrochemical physics that nearly brought down the entire American submarine fleet. And I'm going to teach you how to put it on the end of a fishing hook. 11 cents. That's what it costs. 11 cents to build a weapon so effective, every predatory fish within a quarter-mile radius will stop what they're doing and come find you. No fish finder, no sonar, no $3,000 screen. Just physics. Grab a seat, brother. Lock the door. Because once you understand what I'm about to show you, you will never look at a body of water the same way again. Part 1. The USS Blueback Anomaly. Let's go back to that submarine, the USS Blueback, a diesel-electric attack sub, 219 feet of cold, dark steel prowling the deep Pacific. Petty Officer Raymond Holmes was trained to listen for Soviet submarines. He knew what a torpedo sounded like on sonar. He knew what a passing whale looked like on screen. But he had never seen anything like this. Every single time the captain ordered silent running, engines off, systems down, the whole boat drifting quiet as a coffin on the ocean floor, the same thing happened. Within minutes, the sonar lit up. Not a blip here and there, a swarm. Hundreds of contacts, then thousands, closing in from every direction. Fish, massive schools of marine life converging on the hull as if something was calling them. There was no bait in the water. There was no sound. The sub was running darker than midnight, and yet, every living predator in range was acting like the Blueback was the greatest food source in the ocean. Holmes did what any good sailor would do. He filed a detailed report. He documented the pattern. He flagged it up the chain. And the Navy's response? Immediate classification. Sealed file. 23 years in a locked cabinet. Now ask yourself, why would the United States military bury an observation about fish? What could possibly be so dangerous about schools of fish swarming a submarine? The answer isn't about fish. It's about what the fish were responding to. And that answer changes everything. Part 2. The Giant Galvanic Cell. To understand what those fish were sensing, you have to understand what a submarine actually is, not as a weapon, but as a piece of chemistry. A submarine is not a solid block of steel. The pressure hull? High tensile steel. The propellers? Forged from bronze, a copper alloy. And bolted all along the outside of the hull, you've got massive blocks of zinc called sacrificial anodes. The Navy puts them there on purpose to prevent the salt water from rusting the steel away. Now, here is where it gets interesting. When you take 3 different metals, steel, copper, and zinc, and you submerge them in a conductive electrolyte like salt water, a chemical reaction starts. Automatically. No batteries, no wires, no switch. It's called galvanic corrosion. The zinc, being the most reactive metal, starts bleeding electrons. Those electrons cascade into the steel, and the steel pushes them straight into the copper. The whole thing becomes one massive, self-powered electrical circuit. You know that strange metallic taste when you accidentally bite down on aluminum foil with a silver filling? That little jolt on your tongue? That's galvanic corrosion. Same exact physics, except instead of your mouth, it's happening across a 300-foot submarine hull. And instead of a tiny tingle, the Navy measured the voltage output at 0.7 to 0.8 volts, radiating continuously into the ocean like an invisible beacon. No batteries, no power source, just three metals in salt water generating electricity all by themselves. But the question remained, why would fish care about 0.8 volts? Why would they swarm a metal tube on the ocean floor? Because to a predator, that voltage isn't electricity. It's dinner. Part 3. The sixth sense of the apex predator. If you think a fish finds your lure with its eyes, the tackle industry has done its job. They've sold you a beautiful lie. Because the truth is, the most lethal predators in the water barely need to see anything at all. They have a sense you don't, a sense most anglers have never even heard of. It's called electroreception, and it is the single most powerful hunting tool in the animal kingdom. Here's how it works. Every living thing in water generates a tiny electrical field. Your heartbeat, your muscle contractions, the ions moving across your gills. Every bait fish swimming through the water is broadcasting a faint electrical signature, a rhythmic, pulsing voltage that says, "I'm alive, I'm here." But when a bait fish is injured, when it's struggling, bleeding, dying, that signal changes. Damaged tissue leaks ions. The electrical field spikes. It becomes erratic, chaotic, and strong. And to a predator equipped with electroreception, that erratic voltage is the most irresistible signal in nature. It's blood in the water, except it travels faster, farther, and through total darkness. Sharks detect this with gel-filled pores on their snouts, called the ampullae of Lorenzini. These organs are so impossibly sensitive, they can detect a voltage as faint as 5 nanovolts per centimeter. Let that sink in. 5 billionths of a volt. They can literally feel the heartbeat of a flounder buried under inches of solid sand. But here's what most anglers don't know. It's not just sharks. Your freshwater game fish, catfish, stripers, walleye, they use modified hair cells in their lateral line system as biological voltmeters. They are constantly scanning the water column for one specific signal, the voltage signature of wounded, dying prey. Now, go back to that submarine sitting on the ocean floor. Steel, copper, zinc, all reacting in salt water, broadcasting 0.8 volts into the deep. To every electroreceptive fish in range, the USS Blueback wasn't a warship. It was the biggest, loudest, most irresistible dying animal they had ever sensed. And they came running. Part 4. The 1971 Kalman Experiment. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Electricity is one thing, but what about scent? What about sight? Don't those matter more? Fair question. And a scientist named Adrianus Kalman answered it in 1971 with an experiment so clean, so brutal, that it shut the debate down permanently. Here's what he did. Step 1. He took a live flatfish and buried it under the sand in a tank with hungry sharks. The sharks found it instantly. No surprise, they could see, smell, and sense it. Step 2. He put the flatfish inside an agar chamber, a material that completely blocks scent and sight but lets electrical fields pass right through. Buried it again. The sharks still found it, still attacked it. They couldn't see it, couldn't smell it, but they could feel it. And then came the knockout punch. Step 3. Kalman took fresh-cut chunks of bleeding baitfish, reeking of blood, loaded with scent, and placed them in the tank. Maximum chemical stimulus. Right next to the bait, he buried 2 bare electrodes in the sand, emitting nothing but a faint, artificial electrical pulse mimicking a live fish. No flesh, no blood, no scent, just 2 wires and a tiny current. The sharks ignored the bloody bait entirely. They swam right past the scent trail, past the blood, past the flesh, and attacked the bare electrodes buried in the sand. Read that again if you need to. The most powerful olfactory hunters on the planet chose invisible electricity over visible bleeding meat. The science was undeniable. At close range, the electrical field is the dominant hunting signal, stronger than sight, stronger than smell, stronger than anything. And nobody in the fishing industry wanted you to know that. Part 5. The Submarine Killers. If electroreception were just a fun lab experiment, the story would end there. But it didn't end in a lab. It followed the Navy into the deepest, most classified waters on Earth, and it nearly destroyed the most powerful weapon in the American arsenal. In the 1970s, the Navy rolled out the Ohio-class nuclear submarine, the crown jewel, the ultimate stealth weapon. Billions of dollars of engineering, designed to be invisible. And they had an enemy they never saw coming. Not the Soviets, the cookie-cutter shark. These things are small, barely 18 inches long, but they have circular, saw-like jaws, and they are fearless. They started attacking the submarines, biting chunks out of the neoprene sonar domes, severing exposed communication cables, puncturing seals, and causing critical oil leaks. Picture this: a multi-billion-dollar nuclear submarine carrying enough firepower to end a civilization forced to abort its classified mission, surface, and limp back to port because a fish the size of your forearm thought it was food. It happened not once, not twice. 30 nuclear submarines were pulled off station for repairs. Why? Because the galvanic reaction between the sub's steel hull, copper components, and zinc anodes was broadcasting an electrical superstimulus so powerful that these sharks couldn't resist it. Their ampullae of Lorenzini were screaming, "Eat, now." The Navy's solution? They spent nearly $2 billion, enough to fund NASA for a year, retrofitting the entire fleet with fiberglass domes and insulated housings just to hide the electrical signature from tiny sharks. $2 billion, because they couldn't turn off the chemistry. Think about that. The United States Navy redesigned its most advanced weapons platform because of the exact same electrical reaction I'm about to show you how to put on a fishing hook. Part 6. The billion-dollar blind spot. So here's the question that should keep every angler up at night. The Navy knew since 1962 that 3 common metals in salt water attract fish. Massive quantities of fish. Without bait, without sound, without anything except raw, passive chemistry. So why isn't this on every hook in every tackle shop in America? Look at your tackle bag. Look at your boat. Garmin, Humminbird, Lowrance, LiveScope, side imaging, down imaging, forward-facing sonar. How much money have you spent trying to find fish? The modern fishing electronics industry generates over $8 billion a year. $8 billion. And every single dollar of that depends on one core belief: that finding fish requires technology. Expensive technology. Technology that needs upgrades, subscriptions, and replacement every few seasons. Now imagine if every angler in America realized that two cheap metals touching in water automatically generate a signal that makes fish come to you. No screen, no battery, no boat payment. Nobody in that $8 billion industry has any incentive to teach you this. Not one. Why would they sell you 11 cents of wire when they can sell you a $3,000 screen? The science was there. It was always there. It just wasn't profitable to share it. Until now. Part 7. How to build the triple metal cascade. All right, this is why you're here. This is the part they don't want you to see. I'm going to show you exactly how to take that 600-ton submarine effect and scale it down to the end of your fishing line. We're building what I call the triple metal galvanic cascade, and it costs less than a pack of gum. You need three things, three metals. That's it. Metal 1, your base electrode. Start with a standard high-carbon steel fishing hook. This is the foundation. The steel acts as the bridge between the other two metals. It's what carries the current. Metal 2, the cathode. Take a piece of thin, bare copper wire. You can find it at any hardware store for pennies. Wrap exactly 5 tight turns around the shank of the hook, right up near the eye. Copper is a noble metal, meaning it pulls electrons toward it like a magnet when paired with steel. Metal 3, the amplifier. This is the secret weapon. Take a 1-inch piece of galvanized steel wire, also from the hardware store. Galvanized means it's coated in zinc. Wrap this zinc-coated wire just below the copper, directly onto the bare steel shank. That's it. You're done. Zinc touching steel, touching copper, all on one hook. The moment this hits the water, the reaction starts. The zinc bleeds electrons into the steel. The steel drives those electrons into the copper. The voltage jumps from a negligible 0.3 volts, background noise, to a screaming 0.8 volts. The exact same voltage the Navy measured on the hull of the USS Blueback. You are now holding a hook that broadcasts the bioelectric signature of a massive, wounded, bleeding prey animal. 11 cents. No batteries, no wires, just chemistry doing what chemistry does. Part 8. The field test and the Goldilocks zone. Theory is beautiful, but does it actually catch fish? Let me introduce you to the man who proved it. Carl Denning, 71 years old, retired Navy machinist's mate out of Norfolk, Virginia. Carl spent 22 years of his life doing one thing: maintaining submarine hulls at naval shipyards. He knew galvanic corrosion better than any professor alive because he spent 2 decades scraping the marine life off submarine hulls that this exact reaction had attracted. When Carl retired, he didn't write a paper. He didn't pitch a product. He did something better. He went fishing. For 3 years straight, Carl ran a controlled field test. 2 rods every trip. Same spot, same depth, same bait. 1 rod with a standard hook. 1 rod with the triple metal cascade. Over 300 paired trips. Meticulous logs. No shortcuts. The results were devastating. Overall, the triple metal hook caught 44% more fish. 44%. Same bait, same water, just the hook was different. But the numbers got crazier when he broke it down by species. Channel catfish, which are loaded with electroreceptors, hit the modified hook 51% more often. Blue catfish, 47%. Stripers in the Chesapeake Bay, 38%. Even crappie in stained water jumped 31%. Carl said it best himself. He said fishing with the triple metal cascade felt entirely unfair, like having the gravitational pull of a submarine on a half-ounce hook, pulling predators in from 50 feet away. But the science of voltage isn't a blunt instrument. There's a sweet spot, and if you miss it, you're wasting your time. Researchers have mapped what I call the Goldilocks zone for predatory fish. Below 0.18 volts, too weak. The signal disappears into the natural bio-noise of the water. Between 0.18 and 0.70 volts, you're in the ideal attraction range, perfectly mimicking the distress signal of wounded prey.
And at 0.65 to 0.8 volts, that's the kill zone.
Maximum, aggressive attraction from apex predators in both fresh and salt water. Our triple metal cascade puts you right at 0.8 volts, dead center of the kill zone. And if you think this only works on a hook, think bigger. In a university study on the Columbia River in Oregon, scientists placed two large metal pipes in the river and charged one positive, one negative. Migrating salmon didn't just notice the difference, they altered their entire migration route to swim through the positively charged pipe and avoid the negative one. Fish actively navigate by electrical fields. It's hardwired into their biology. Part 9. The exceptions, where the hack fails. All right, I've given you the weapon. Now let me give you the truth. Because the science doesn't lie, and it doesn't lie in your favor on everything. There are 3 situations where this system does not work. And if I didn't tell you about them, I'd be no better than the guys selling you $1,000 miracle lures. Exception 1. Largemouth bass. I know, I can hear the tournament guys groaning. But here's the biology. Largemouth bass evolved as visual and mechanoreceptive hunters. They rely on their eyes and the pressure waves detected by their lateral line. They do not have the dense ampullary electroreceptors that catfish and sharks carry. The galvanic field barely registers on their attack response. If you're a bass angler, keep this trick in your back pocket for other species, but don't expect it to change your bass game. Exception 2. Cold water. Temperature is the throttle for this chemical reaction. When the water drops below 55 degrees Fahrenheit, the ionic transfer between the 3 metals slows to a crawl. The electrical signal weakens. Carl Denning's logs showed peak performance between 55 and 85 degrees. Below 55, the battery dies. Above 85, the chemistry is fast, but the fish are lethargic from heat and stop feeding. So if you're chasing trout in a cold mountain stream in November, save your copper wire for another day. Exception 3. Maintenance. This isn't a set-it-and-forget-it rig. The zinc wire is a sacrificial anode. It's literally designed to destroy itself to generate the electricity. After 3 or 4 trips, that galvanized wire will be eaten away and needs to be replaced. The copper will oxidize, turn green with verdigris after 8 to 10 trips. That green layer is an insulator and it kills the signal. Scrape it clean with a blade before every trip to expose the bare metal. But at less than a nickel per trip in wire, it's the cheapest maintenance in the history of fishing. Part 10. When voltage becomes a weapon. One more thing before we close, and this part is important. What happens if you push the voltage past the sweet spot, past 0.8 volts? What happens at 1.2 volts and above? The dinner bell becomes a warning siren. Voltages above 1.2 volts trigger a severe fright response in fish, involuntary muscle spasms, panic, immediate flight. The same science that attracts them at 0.8 volts repels them violently at 1.2. And here's the twist that even I didn't see coming. Scientists are now using this exact principle to save endangered sharks. They're attaching blocks of zinc and graphite to commercial long-line fishing gear, intentionally creating a high-voltage field that overwhelms the shark's ampullae of Lorenzini. The result? An invisible electric fence that reduces accidental shark bycatch by nearly 70%. The same physics that catches your dinner is now saving apex predators from extinction. That's not just science. That's poetry. But I need to say this, and I mean it. Be responsible. A single modified hook releases a negligible amount of ions. But copper and zinc are heavy metals. In high concentrations, dissolved copper binds to fish gills and disrupts their ability to regulate sodium. It suffocates them. Never discard your zinc and copper wraps into the water. Use the hack, catch your limit, and take your metals home. Respect the resource. Conclusion. Let's bring it home. In 1962, a sonar tech on the USS Blueback watched a dead-silent submarine attract a wall of living creatures from the blackness of the deep ocean. The Navy classified it. They buried it. Because the explanation, 3 common metals generating an irresistible electrical field in water, was too simple, too cheap, and too dangerous to an industry built on selling complexity. We know predatory fish possess electroreceptors tuned to hunt the exact voltage this reaction produces. We know a retired Navy machinist proved, over 300 trips and 3 years of data, that this 11-cent modification yields 44% more fish on electrosensitive species. The billion-dollar companies want you staring at a screen, chasing shadows on a digital map. But the apex predator doesn't use a screen. It uses the ancient, silent electricity of the water. Now, so do you. Go to the hardware store. Buy the copper, buy the zinc. Build the triple metal cascade. Cast it into the dark water and let the physics do the hunting. If this video opened your eyes, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and send this to every angler you know who's still making payments on a fish finder. The secret is out. Stay sharp, stay rebellious, and I'll see you on the water. This is Forbidden Lures, signing off.